The moment my daughter said his name, I stopped breathing. I was standing in my kitchen, same as any other Tuesday morning, pouring my second cup of coffee. The phone was wedged between my ear and my shoulder, the way I always hold it when I'm doing something else. And then she said it. "Dad, I want you to meet someone. His name is Lyle. Lyle Beaumont." I set the coffee mug down so carefully it didn't make a single sound. "Dad, you still there?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here." 40 years of practice keeping my voice steady. 32 of those years working the floor at a GM assembly plant in Flint, Michigan, where you learned real fast not to let anyone see you flinch. I used every one of those years in that moment. "I really want you two to meet," my daughter said. She sounded the way she used to sound on Christmas morning when she was 7 years old. Pure, excited, like the world was still a place where nothing bad could happen. Her name is Claire. She's 34. She teaches third grade at an elementary school outside of Columbus, Ohio, which is where she moved after college to be close to her best friend. She's the kind of person who leaves birdseed out in January and checks on her elderly neighbors after snowstorms. She got all of that from her mother, God rest her soul. Her mother, Beverly, passed 8 years ago from ovarian cancer. After that, it was just the two of us. Claire is everything I have left. And she had just told me she was in love with Lyle Beaumont. I don't know how I finished that phone call. I remember saying, "That's wonderful, honey, and I can't wait to meet him, and let's set something up soon." All the right words in all the right order. And then I hung up, and I stood there in my kitchen for a long time without moving. The last time I'd heard that name was 11 years ago, in a courthouse in Toledo. I need to go back a little. Bear with me. I worked for 32 years at that plant in Flint, but in my late 40s I started a small business on the side, nothing fancy. I bought distressed rental properties, fixed them up, rented them out. I had 4 units by the time I was 53. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine, something I built with my own hands and Beverly's encouragement. In 2009, I partnered with a man named Lyle Beaumont. He came recommended through a guy I knew from church, trustworthy source, I thought. Lyle was smooth, articulate. He wore clean-pressed shirts and knew just enough about real estate to sound credible. We put together a small investment group, 6 people. The plan was simple: pool our money, buy a larger commercial property in downtown Toledo that was going for cheap after the financial crisis, renovate, lease it out. Should have been straightforward. Instead, Lyle Beaumont emptied the escrow account and vanished. $340,000, gone in a weekend. He'd be moving money around for months, we found out later. Layers of LLCs, accounts in different states. By the time we figured out what happened, he'd already transferred most of it. Our attorney told us we'd be lucky to recover 15 cents on the dollar through civil court. I lost $68,000 that year. Beverly was already sick. We'd been counting on that money for her treatment, for the gap between what insurance covered and what it didn't. I don't blame our financial situation for what happened to her. Cancer doesn't negotiate. But I spent a long time lying awake at night, wondering if better options might have bought us more time. Lyle Beaumont eventually did 18 months in a minimum security federal facility for wire fraud. 18 months. Then he walked out. I never heard his name again, until my daughter said it on a Tuesday morning while I was pouring coffee. I told myself maybe it was a different Lyle Beaumont. It's not the most common name in the world, but it's not impossible. I Googled him that afternoon. It took me less than 3 minutes to confirm it was the same man. He was 51 now. He'd relocated from Toledo to Columbus sometime in the last few years. He did financial consulting. His LinkedIn profile had a professional headshot and a list of buzzwords and not a single mention of a federal conviction. I sat with this for 2 days before I said anything. I drove down to Columbus on a Saturday in March. Claire had set up a casual lunch, a place called Barley and Board on the short north, one of those exposed brick gastropubs that opened up after the neighborhood got trendy. I got there early and sat at the bar with a club soda, watching the door. He walked in 11 minutes before noon. Taller than I remembered, or maybe I remembered him smaller because of what he did. His hair was silver at the temples now. He had on a navy blazer and dark jeans, and he held the door open for an older couple coming out behind him. A small gesture, rehearsed looking, the kind of thing you do when you want people to notice you doing it. Claire came in right behind him. She was glowing. I hadn't seen her look that way since before her mother got sick, and something about it made my chest ache in a way I can't fully describe. Joy and grief and fear all pressed together. I stood up. I shook his hand. He looked straight at me. Not a flicker. Either he didn't recognize me or he was better at this than I remembered. Both possibilities scared me equally. Lunch was an hour and 15 minutes of me smiling and asking questions and listening to Lyle Beaumont explain himself. He told me he'd had some setbacks in his 40s. He used that word, setbacks, the way you describe a car breaking down, and that he'd done a lot of work on himself since then. He talked about his consulting business. He talked about how much he loved my daughter. Claire watched him the way she used to watch her mother, with her whole face. I drove home on I-71 with my hands at 10 and 2 and the radio off, and I thought about how to do this without losing her. Because that was the real danger, not Lyle Beaumont. I had no doubt that if I laid it out plainly, here's who this man is, here's what he did, here's the court records, Claire would look me in the eye and see a father who'd just revealed a grudge. She'd think I was trying to sabotage her happiness because I was lonely, or overprotective, or still not over her mother. She was in love. Love has its own logic, and it is largely immune to facts delivered by someone with an obvious stake in the outcome. I needed something she couldn't argue with. The following week I called my old friend Pete, who retired early from the Toledo Police Department and now did private investigations out of an office in Maumee. Pete and I had fished together for 20 years. He owed me nothing, but he was the kind of man who helped anyway. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always respected about Pete. When I was done, he said, "Give me 10 days." In those 10 days, I went about my life. I called Claire every Sunday the way I always do. I asked about school, about her kids in 3rd grade, about whether she'd fixed the slow drain in her bathroom sink. I said nothing about Lyle. She mentioned him twice, casually, the way you mention someone who's just become part of the furniture of your daily life. It took everything I had to keep my voice even. Pete came back to me in 8 days, not 10. He'd found 3 things. The first was a civil judgment against Lyle in Franklin County from 2019, 4 years after his release, for $22,000 owed to a woman he'd apparently convinced to invest in a real estate development opportunity that never materialized. She'd won the judgment. He'd never paid it. It was sitting there in the public record unresolved. The second was a woman named Audrey Schilling in Cincinnati, who dated Lyle for almost 2 years, between 2020 and 22. Peter tracked her down through county records. She'd filed a protective order against Lyle in Hamilton County in October of 2022. It had been dismissed 4 months later, which Pete said was common and didn't mean nothing happened. He'd gotten her phone number from a mutual contact, and she'd agreed to talk. I called Audrey on a Wednesday evening. She picked up on the second ring. She talked for 40 minutes. I mostly listened. She told me about the early months, how charming he was, how attentive, how he had a way of making you feel like the only person in the room. Then she described the slow shift, the way he started making small decisions for her, the way he got quiet and cold whenever she spent time with her sister, the way he'd introduced her to a financial opportunity that cost her $11,000 before she realized what was happening. The protective order had come after she tried to break it off, and he'd shown up at her workplace twice in 1 week. "Does he know where you live now?" I asked her. "I moved," she said. "That's not an accident." I asked if she'd be willing to speak to my daughter. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "If it helps someone else, yes." The third thing Pete found was the most important. Lyle was currently involved in what looked like another investment scheme, this one targeting retirees in the Columbus area, through a wealth preservation seminar series he was running out of a hotel conference room in Dublin, Ohio. Pete had attended one, paid the $40 entry fee, sat in the back, taken notes. He had the brochure, he had photographs of the whiteboard presentation, he had the name of the LLC, which Pete had traced to a registered agent in Nevada with no other assets attached to it. A shell. I drove back to Columbus on a Sunday afternoon, 4 weeks after that first lunch. I called Claire the night before and asked if we could have dinner, just the two of us. She said of course, and she sounded pleased. We hadn't done a justice dinner in a while. She picked a quiet Italian place in Clintonville that she liked. We were halfway through our pasta when I took the folder out of my jacket pocket and set it on the table. "I need to show you something," I said, "and I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything. Can you do that for me?" She looked at the folder. She looked at me. "Dad, what is this?" "Please," I said. She nodded slowly. I started with the federal conviction. I had the case number, the charging documents, a summary Pete had pulled together. I told her about the investment group, about the 6 people who'd lost money, about Beverly's treatment year, about the $68,000. I kept my voice level. I was not going to cry, and I was not going to get angry, because either one of those things would have made this about me. I watched Claire's face as I talked. She went very still the way she does when she's concentrating hard, the same way she used to sit at the kitchen table working through her math homework as a kid. Then the 2019 civil judgment. Then Audrey Schilling's name, and I told her that Audrey had agreed to speak with her directly, that she could call her tonight or tomorrow or whenever she was ready, and I slid a piece of paper with Audrey's number across the table. Then Pete's notes from the Dublin seminar, the brochure, the photographs of the whiteboard, the Shell LLC. When I was done, I folded my hands on the table and waited. Claire sat there for a long time, 30 seconds maybe, but it felt like much longer. "You went looking for this," she finally said. "Yes." "Because of what he did to you?" "Because of what he did to me," I said, "and because of what he's doing now. Those are 2 different things, and both of them are true." She looked down at the papers. She picked up the brochure from the Dublin seminar and read it in a way that told me she was really reading it, not just looking at it. "I knew about the conviction," she said quietly. "I had not expected that." "He told me about it," she continued, "in December. He told me he'd made bad decisions, that he'd served time, that he wasn't proud of it. He said it was the worst period of his life, and that losing that time changed him." I thought about Audrey Schilling's 40-minute phone call. I thought about the Shell LLC in Nevada. "Did he tell you about the 2019 judgment?" I asked. "The woman who won in Franklin County?" Silence. "Did he tell you about Audrey?" More silence. "Did he tell you he's running another seminar series right now? Same structure, different name, different hotel?" She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying yet. She was holding it together with both hands. "He told you about the conviction," I said, "because he knew I might find it and bring it to you. He controlled the story. He got there first. That's what he does, Claire. He's very good at it. I watched him do it for an hour and 15 minutes at Barley and Board, and I didn't recognize it until I was back on the highway." She looked at the paper with Audrey's number on it. "I need to think," she said. "Okay," I said. "I need you to not say anything else tonight." "Okay," I said. We finished dinner mostly in silence. I paid the check. In the parking lot she hugged me for a long time, longer than usual, and I stood there and let her hold on for as long as she needed. Then she got in her car and drove away. I didn't sleep much that night. She called Audrey 3 days later. I know this because Audrey sent me a short text message that said only, "We talked for 2 hours. She's a good person. I hope she's okay." 2 days after that, Claire called me. She'd spoken to Lyle. She didn't tell me exactly what was said, and I didn't ask. She told me it was over. She told me she'd also contacted the Franklin County DA's office about the seminar series and given them Pete's documentation. I hadn't suggested that. She'd thought of it herself. "I was angry at you for a few days," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm not anymore." "I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. He told me you were the one who never got over what happened. That you've been carrying a grudge for years and that if you ever met him, you'd find a way to tear it apart. I took that in. He knew who you were, I said, at lunch. Yes, she said, he recognized you. I thought about the handshake, the eyes that didn't flicker, the navy blazer and the open door and the word setbacks. He was that confident? I asked. He thought he had me completely, she said, and for a while he did. There was a long pause on the line. Mom would have figured him out in 10 minutes, Claire said. Probably 5, I said. She laughed. It was a small sound, still a little raw around the edges, but it was real. It was her laugh, the one I'd known since she was an infant, and hearing it that afternoon standing in my kitchen in Flint was enough. A few months later, I got a call from Pete. The Franklin County DA had opened a preliminary inquiry into the Seminar LLC. Nothing had been formally charged yet, these things take time, and I wasn't holding my breath. But the inquiry was open. 3 other people had come forward with complaints after Claire's report apparently prompted investigators to look more closely. I don't know what ultimately happened to Lyle Beaumont. Maybe something, maybe nothing. The legal system doesn't always deliver the kind of ending that feels right, and I learned that lesson once already in Toledo. What I know is that my daughter is okay. She took a week off from school, stayed with a friend, went hiking in Hocking Hill State Park with a group of people who love her. She texted me a picture of the view from Ash Cave. Grey November light over the gorge, bare trees, that particular quiet that Ohio gets in late fall. I put it as the wallpaper on my phone. Still have it there. There's a thing that happens when you lose someone. I mean really lose them the way I lost Beverly, where the people who are still here start to look different to you, more vivid, more precious and also more fragile. I watched Claire walk into that gastropub in March, glowing the way she was glowing, and I understood in my gut that I would do whatever I had to do to make sure she was okay. Not because I'm a good father. I'm not always. I was absent too much when she was young, too wrapped up in the plant, too slow to learn the things fathers are supposed to know. Beverly did the heavier lifting between us, no question about it. But I'm still here, and Lyle Beaumont underestimated that. He walked into a room, shook my hand, looked straight at me and thought, this old man is no threat. He thought a grudge and a quiet nature, and a father who just wanted his daughter to be happy meant he was safe. He was wrong about that. I think about Beverly sometimes when I'm standing at the kitchen window in the morning with my coffee, before the neighborhood wakes up, before the day starts. I think about what she would say if she could see how this turned out. She would not say I told you so, because that was never her style. She would probably say something practical, something about making sure Claire was eating right and getting enough sleep. But she might also squeeze my hand the way she used to. I'd like to think she would. I've been thinking about what would have happened if I'd done nothing. If I'd convinced myself it wasn't my place. If I'd told myself she was an adult and she'd figure it out on her own. If I'd let the fear of losing her keep me quiet while a man I already knew was capable of deliberate harm walked her slowly toward the edge of something she couldn't see coming. I think about that version of the story sometimes, and it makes me feel cold in a way that has nothing to do with the weather. What stopped me wasn't anger, even though the anger was there. What stopped me from doing nothing was something simpler and harder to name. A basic sense that when you know something true and important, and the person you love most in the world doesn't know it yet, you owe them that truth, even when delivering it costs you something, even when it might not be received the way you intend. The right thing to do and the easy thing to do are almost never the same thing, and somewhere in my 60s I stopped expecting them to be. That's the part I keep coming back to. Lyle Beaumont was counting on the gap between what I knew and what I was willing to risk. He looked at a quiet man in his 60s who just wanted his daughter to be happy, and he calculated that I would absorb the loss and say nothing. He'd done that math before. He'd been doing it his whole life. People like him survive on the assumption that most of us will choose comfort over confrontation. He was wrong about me because he didn't know the whole of me. He didn't know about the years working the floor in Flint, where you learn that problems don't disappear because you look away from them. He didn't know about Beverly, about what it does to a person to sit beside someone they love while they fight for their life and to feel absolutely powerless. After you've lived through that kind of helplessness, the kind that Lyle Beaumont represented, the kind you can actually do something about, looks very different. I'm not a perfect father. I said that in the story and I meant it. I was late to a lot of things that mattered, but I showed up for this one, and I showed up with something more than good intentions. I showed up with documentation, with patience, with a private investigator friend who knew how to find what was actually there, rather than what someone wanted you to see. That's not heroism. That's just the work of paying attention and following through. Which sounds ordinary until you consider how many people don't do it. Claire called Audrey herself. She made that choice. She contacted the DA's office herself. She made that choice too. I gave her information. She decided what to do with it. That matters. I wasn't trying to control the outcome. I was trying to make sure she had the full picture because she deserved to make her decision with her eyes open. What I hope, if anyone watching this takes anything away, is this. The people who love you and tell you something you don't want to hear are not always your enemies. Sometimes they are the only ones in the room who aren't trying to manage you. And the ability to sit with that, to hear a hard thing and stay curious instead of immediately defensive, that's a kind of strength that protects you in ways that no amount of charm or good intentions ever could. Lyle walked into Barley and Board that afternoon believing he'd already won. He had Claire. He had his story already shaped. He had a decade of practice making the truth sound like bitterness. What he didn't have was the other half of the evidence. That's what patience looks like, I think. Not giving up on the people you love when the first conversation goes badly. Not deciding the outcome before you've gathered everything that's true. Staying in it long enough to find the thing that can't be argued away. Beverly would have had him figured out before the appetizers arrived. I just needed a little longer.